Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to show another video on different flower centers that you can make, specifically this Pearlized center here. And I just want to talk really quickly about flower centers. You can make many different types of flowers using different flower petals, or you can reuse the same petals, but you can really make it look different with the flower center that you used. And so for this flower, I've been working on some filler flowers, as I like to call them. I usually like these to be a little bit round, and I like to stick these in backdrops so that they balance out the flowers if they're too big or different colors, but these are nice to have. I will have a tutorial on this specific petal, but I wanted to show really quickly just the way different flower centers can make a flower look. The first one is one that you can make using just a regular piece of paper, what I like to call a fringe cut. And this is just the most sort of basic flower center. You see that with different colors you can also make that look really nice. And on its own, this is, it looks great as it is, at least I think. So this is fine if this is where you want to stop. But if you do want to make flower centers that look a little more glammed up or make them look a little bit nicer, you can have different options. I did make this flower center in a previous video. This obviously won't fit in here, but I kind of put it in there. You can see how it adds more interest to the center of the flower, and it makes it look really nice. Obviously this is too big for this flower. You can do just a plain glittered center in the middle. See how that looks there. And lastly, what I'll be talking about today is this pearl center. Now I did use a white piece of paper, and this is obviously a white center, so it's hard to see, but again, the whole idea is that it can change up the look of the arrangement that you're making, or just a specific flower, if you just switch different flower centers. So today I wanted to work on showing you how you can make this pearlized center. I used white beads, and with my filming equipment it might be washing it out a little bit, but it looks really nice. Gives this a little iridescence to the flower if you're using a darker flower. You can imagine that the contrast is greater, and you can see the full effect of having such a intricate flower center. And I'm just going to decide. This flower center, it isn't exactly difficult to make, but it is quite time consuming. There are different ways that you can also make it, and there's pros and cons of each. Time and money usually is a factor, but I wanted to show two ways that you can make it. So I have two styrofoam balls. The type of styrofoam that I like to get is the one that's smooth. So there's this styrofoam that sort of, if you scratch it, pieces will fall off. So that styrofoam is one that I like to avoid using. So if you're in the craft store, you're wondering which one to get, I prefer the smoother one. And the two things I have to make this beaded center is I have just plastic beads, and they look like pearls. This one has 750 pieces, so 750 beads. I bought this at Joann's, I believe, and I had a 50% off coupon. I believe it was $4.50, so this was only like $2 or something like that, and I obviously had a lot of pearl beads left. The problem with these is that they do have a hole through the center of it for in order to be strung, and so you will need to glue them in a certain way that you don't see the hole, which isn't too difficult. And the second thing is you can have sort of the pearl beads that can lay flat, so just sort of a half dome of the pearl, and it has adhesive underneath, so that all you need to do is just cut and stick it on any surface that you want. So these are the two options I'm going to show today. The first one, I'll start with this pearl embellishment that has the adhesive in the back. And so I bought this at Michael's, I believe, for, I believe regular price is $4.99. I always use a coupon, so I think it was maybe $2.50. But it comes in a roll like this, with a plastic backing so that you can remove it and then you can feel the sticky underneath the beads. The problem with this is that it's more convenient, but you only get so much you only get so much product for what you're doing. And so that could be a problem if you want to make a lot of these pearlized centers. And so I do know they come in different sorts of packaging, so you can find things like this in a sheet. It might be a little bit more cost effective. It depends on where you're purchasing. It could be cheaper, but you could just peel it right off of the backing and then stick it right onto the ball. So what I'm doing is I'm starting at the center, and then I'm gluing it. I'm pressing it down so it's adhering to the styrofoam, and then I'm cutting off at the end where I don't need it, and then I just continue on gluing these strips to the styrofoam ball. So it can get kind of tricky at first if you are new to doing this, but essentially you just lay it in strips across the ball. And I'm going to do this for the entire ball, and I'll show you what it looks like at the end. And so that's the finished product using this adhesive embellishment strip with the pearls on it. And if you're a perfectionist, I would suggest that you just throw that out the window because they do not line up perfectly. That's one thing about these strips, is that with the glue underneath, they could be longer or shorter distance between when the next bead is on the line, and so they don't line up perfectly, but also when you're gluing it, it doesn't end up perfectly either. So this looks really nice. I actually like the color of this bead better. It has sort of a champagne look to it, a tint to it. These are just bright white. I'm not sure if it picks up on the camera, but this was really easy. All I did was just stick them on the ball, and it just took all of maybe 5 to 10 minutes to do. And this is a 2-inch ball. This is also the same size ball. If I flip it underneath, you can see, except that this one I used hot glue to glue on these plastic beads, and so I'll do that one next. For this one, I'm actually going to glue the beads onto the ball, and just for reference, these two use the same size ball, but gluing the beads, they are perfectly round beads, unlike these right here where they're just half of the bead, so they're flat underneath with that adhesive. So this one looks bigger. That's something to keep in mind. Also, if you want a smaller center, then I would go with the smaller ball if you are gluing them on with beads. So with this, with gluing them on, I did mention that the cost of the package was about $4.49 or $5 for 750 beads, and that's without a coupon. So it's really inexpensive. You see with this one, I cannot make another ball. I just have some left over, but with the beads, I can make quite a few. And the way that I'm going to start assembling the center is just by adding glue, a little bit of glue at the very top, right onto the ball. And then I'm going to be careful that I'm keeping the beaded side where I can string a piece of string through the bead sideways so that it's not pointing up. And as I glue them, they will not be able to, or they won't show up as well as if you just didn't care where you were placing them, and sometimes the side with the holes in it are showing. And I'd like to do this as straight as I could. And if you're using the type of styrofoam ball that sort of flakes off if you touch it or scratch it, again, this is a smooth ball. If you're using that type of styrofoam, I would recommend using a low temp glue gun. Right now I'm using a high temp glue gun, just the same one that I'm using for my petals and my flowers. mainly because you do not want to melt that type of styrofoam with the glue that you're using. So, whoops. So all I'm doing is laying a line of pearls as I glue. And I'm not trying to add too much glue because it will dry and cool down and it may not stick as well anymore. But I just try to grab a couple and stick it on. And if you're afraid of getting burned, then I would just use tweezers, but I'm letting the glue cool down just a bit and then adding those pearls, so I should be fine. The great thing about using the hot glue is that it dries very quickly. I did try to use tacky glue instead, but I found that it took too long for the glue to dry, and then some of the pearls would just slide right off. And it just took way too much time for them to dry and stay on. That hot glue works just fine, and you don't have to use any sort of industrial glue like E6000 or Gemtac, especially because once you put these pearls on and they dry, you generally don't need to do anything to the center where it may fall off. So what I'm doing while I'm gluing the second row is that I'm going in between the layer that I did before. So it's staggered just a bit, and that way it's got a nice close pattern, and then there isn't too much spacing between the beads. I try not to add too much glue at once also. It's very easy to want to rush this, but you just need to take your time. And it goes quite quickly if you're using a smaller ball. And one thing about this is that you do sort of see the glue. It doesn't dry clear, so you'll see that hot glue underneath, but honestly, if you are using pearl looking beads like these, it sort of blends in with the glue. If you're using something else that might show the difference in color, so you might see that white glue, then you may want to use a different type of adhesive for your pearls. But essentially you just keep going in this fashion until you cover the entire ball. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you the end of what it looks like. Alright, now that I am on the very last portion of this styrofoam ball, I'll finish it right now. So one thing I'd say is that if you're using these flowers, I would go for a smaller size styrofoam ball. That way you don't have to spend a lot of time doing this unless you want to, unless you're making very large flowers. But the smaller the ball, the easier it'll be. And you can also use bigger beads. So these are 6mm beads. So you can use something that's a little bit bigger so that it takes less time to actually glue them on. Okay, now that I've finished, I want to show you what it looks like. I'm not sure if the camera washes it out, but this was a 3-inch ball. I cut the styrofoam ball that I cut in half again, and then I just glued the beads all throughout. So in between these beads, you see the dried glue. If you're using a white bead like I am, or a white pearlescent bead like I am, you really don't notice it very much. If you're using a different type of bead, it may show, so keep that in mind. But overall, these are not difficult to do. They are a little bit time consuming, but I think the results are worth it. So overall, there are 2 methods that you can do, at least with what I presented. You can go the route where the beads are already stuck, or they already have an adhesive in the back, and then you could just peel it away from the backing and then stick them onto your styrofoam ball or whatever surface that you're using. And then you can also just manually glue them onto the styrofoam ball yourself using plastic beads. Using the plastic beads is definitely a little bit more economical unless you can find these for a cheaper price. Overall, it does look the same. This one doesn't have that glue in between, but honestly, I don't notice it very much. I just think that it's the styrofoam ball. And in the end, it does have a nice effect. I wonder if you could see this a little bit better because the beads are a little bit tinted. But I do have some flowers that I have not finished. So this is from my template 10 flower. So overall, it looks really nice. You can imagine that with a bigger ball, it has a greater effect. I actually like this one a lot better than the small mini ones. So overall, just to sum it up, all I've done is glue plastic beads that have sort of a pearl shimmer to a styrofoam ball, and then you can use that as the center. Or you can use the adhesive-backed embellishments and just stick them on, which is less messy and takes less time, although it is a little bit more pricey. So these are different routes that you can go. I am filming this video a little bit late just so that I can get it done. So if I'm a little bit scattered and I forgot to mention anything, please leave me a comment below or send me an email and I can definitely answer that for you. But I hope that this tutorial was helpful in presenting a new or different option for flower centers if you don't want to do that sort of fringe cut as I did for these flowers. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.